Oblivion at 12,000 meters. How we traded the sky for a number on a report. Imagine a cage, not one made of bars, but one crafted from fear, ignorance, and urgency. Inside it, a genius. His name is Vladimir Petlyakov. He and his team, also imprisoned specialists, aren't just designing an airplane. They're sketching the future. They're creating a machine meant to soar where no one had been before in the stratosphere, at a dizzying altitude of 12,200 meters. These aren't just numbers. This is a different world. A world of bitter, cold, and thin air, where a regular plane would fall apart and a pilot would die without special protection. And they conquered this world. The 6-100, affectionately called the Satka 100, isn't just an airplane. It's the spaceship of its time. It had pressurized cabins so the pilots could breathe, turbochargers so the engines wouldn't suffocate at altitude. It was a high-altitude interceptor, a guardian of the skies, capable of finding and destroying any enemy that dared approach our airspace. It was the queen on the chessboard of the future wore the strongest, most mobile piece. It was the embodiment of a dream. Now, close your eyes and imagine this dream being broken over a knee. Literally, just a few months passed. December 39th, the Satka's flight a triumph. Then, spring of 40 and the same Petlyakov, the same team, but now not in a design bureau, but in a Sharashka prison design bureau, receives an order that makes your blood run cold. Not just a new project. They are told, forget your fighter. In a month and a half, turn it into a dive bomber. Why? What happened? What happened was dive bombing euphoria. Our leadership watched the blitzkrieg in Europe, how German Stukas Ju-87, with screaming sirens, plunged onto positions, sowing panic and destruction. And it panicked itself. We urgently needed a similar wonder weapon. Strategic thinking, planning for a future war decades ahead, was thrown on the scrap heap of history for the sake of a momentary tactical copy. The future was sacrificed to the present, and the slaughter began, not at the front, but on the drawing boards. They stripped the Satka of its main advantages, the turbochargers and pressurized cabins. Why would a low-flying bomber need them? Its ceiling plummeted from a staggering 12,000 to a mundane 8,700 meters. The very soul of the machine changed. From a refined aristocrat of the heavens, a sniper of the stratosphere, it was violently transformed into a crude workhorse of war, forced to dive into the inferno of anti-aircraft fire. This is how the Pe-2, the famous Peshka pawn, was born, and it was accepted into service for one reason: only it could reach an incredible 540 kilometers per hour. That number, like a hypnotic flash, blinded everyone. They bought into it. It became the justification for all the sacrifices made at the altar of speed. The duel that never was. Pe-2 versus AR-2, when one lost without even taking off. But the story doesn't end here. It's only beginning. Here's the most interesting part. The pawn had a direct, honest competitor. The AR-2 aircraft, the brainchild of another brilliant designer, Arkangelsky. And this wasn't a converted fighter, but a machine designed from the outset as a bomber. It was a logical, well-thought-out evolution of previous successful models. Both planes were tested almost simultaneously, and that's when things got interesting. Yes, the Pe-2 was faster. Those same 540 versus 512 kilometers per hour. 28 kilometers per hour, a number that became fatal. But what did the AR-2 have? It had everything the pawn so desperately lacked. Ease of control. The AR-2 had a straight wing. A pilot of average skill could fly it without risking his life. The Pe-2 had a complex laminar wing requiring the highest mastery. A pilot had to be an ace just for takeoff. Real bomb load. On paper, the Pe-2 carried 1,000 kilograms of bombs. In practice, rarely more than 600, because with more weight it simply wouldn't take off. The AR-2 calmly lifted 1,500 kilograms. That's 2.5 times more. Imagine how many extra sorties pawn crews had to fly to inflict the same damage. Safety. The AR-2's aerodynamics were better at low speeds during takeoff and landing, the most dangerous phases of flight. But the command, afflicted by a virus I call speed fetishism, saw only one line in the table: 28 kilometers per hour. Everything else was declared non-essential. The irony of fate couldn't have been more bitter. Let's use logic and analysis. The main enemy of our bomber was the German Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighter. The F model could do 620 kilometers per hour, and the next one, the G, a full 640. Get it? For the Messer, the difference between 512 and 540 kilometers per hour did not exist. It caught up and shot down both planes with equal ease. The very incredible speed of the Pe-2, for which everything was sacrificed, went unnoticed by the enemy. It was a phantom, a mirage that cost us thousands of pilots' lives, lost not in combat, but during takeoffs and landings while mastering this complex and accident-prone machine. Economic background and analysis. The price of speed in rubles and lives. Let's look at this situation through the lens of economics. The late 30s and early 40s. The USSR had a mobilization economy. Every ruble, every machine tool, every kilogram of metal counted. The country was in the grip of industrialization, preparing for a major war. The decision to launch mass production of the Pe-2 and not the AR-2 was not only a technical, but also a profound economic miscalculation. Why? Cost of training. Training a pilot for the Pe-2 took longer and required more resources, fuel, spare parts, ace instructors, due to its complexity. These are colossal costs. The AR-2 was simpler, meaning a pilot could be trained faster and cheaper. In the face of an impending war, when time is the most valuable resource, this was a critically important factor. Non-combat losses. The high accident rate of the Pe-2 is not just a tragedy. It's a direct economic loss. Every plane crashed on takeoff represents thousands of man-hours of work, tens of tons of scarce aluminum, engines, instruments, and weapons turning into scrap metal. And most importantly, the death or injury of a trained crew, whose training also cost a fortune. The AR-2, being simpler and safer, could potentially have saved the country hundreds of millions of rubles and preserved thousands of experienced pilots' lives. Combat sortie efficiency. An aircraft with a real load of 1.5 tons, AR-2, versus an aircraft with a load of 600 kilograms, the practical load of the Pe-2. To deliver 3 tons of bombs to a target, the pawns needed to make 5 sorties. The AR-2 only 2. Let's calculate. 5 times more risk for the crews, 5 times more fuel consumption, 5 times more wear and tear on equipment, 5 times more time. The economic inefficiency is colossal. Thus, the choice in favor of the Pe-2 was dictated not by economic feasibility, but by political hysteria and the pursuit of one, essentially useless, indicator. This is a classic example of how a momentary optimization of one parameter leads to catastrophic systemic losses in all others. The true king who was late, 2-2. And now we come to the bitterest part of our story. Was there an alternative? Not just an alternative like the AR-2, but a machine that could become the very queen they originally dreamed of? There was, and its name was the 2-2. The designer Andrei Tupolev, who also went through the Sharashka. This aircraft appeared a little later, but it was head and shoulders above the pawn in every respect. Let's compare them as if we were choosing a car today. Armament. The 2 had 2 powerful 20mm SHVK cannons and 3 heavy-caliber 12.7mm UB machine guns. It's like arming a guard with 2 assault rifles and 3 pistols. The Pe-2 had 2 regular UB machine guns and 2 small-caliber SHKs. That's 2 pistols and 2 non-lethal guns. The difference in firepower is monstrous. Bomb load. The Pe-2 calmly carried up to 3 tons of bombs. The Pe-2 in practice those same 600 kilograms. 5 times less. Ceiling and survivability. 9,500 meters versus 8,700. The Tu-2's engines were radial, air-cooled. Such engines could keep working even after several hits. The Pe-2's liquid-cooled M105 engines were vulnerable. A single bullet in the radiator doomed the plane. The Tu-2 was that very universal, powerful, modern frontline bomber, the dream aircraft that could not only bomb, but also fight off fighters. It was a qualitative breakthrough, but it was unlucky with its timing. By the time the Tu-2 was ready for mass production, the entire Soviet industry was already tooled for producing the Pe-2. Dozens of factories, thousands of machine tools, hundreds of thousands of workers were set up to produce the pawn. Retooling all this for a new, more complex machine meant stopping the assembly lines for months. And in 41 and 42, every day counted. The Germans were at the gates of Moscow, and the command made a seemingly pragmatic decision. Don't interfere with a working conveyor. They chose the path of least resistance, the path of inertia. And this inertia predetermined the fate of our frontline aviation for years to come. The skies were filled not with the best aircraft, but with those that were easier to produce. Quality was once again sacrificed for quantity. Reflections, the lessons of the pawn for our time. The story of the Pe-2 isn't just a chapter in an aviation history textbook. It's a powerful parable, more relevant today than ever. It's a story about how we ourselves, blinded by one bright number, drive ourselves into a trap. We see this everywhere. In business, a company chases quarterly profit. That same speed, cuts our D-spending, removes the turbochargers, loses strategic perspective, and goes bankrupt 5 years later because competitors who thought 10 years ahead overtook it. In education, a school drills students to pass standardized tests, another performance indicator, forgetting to teach them to think critically, create, and work in teams. As a result, we get a generation that only knows how to check boxes and tests, but is incapable of real breakthroughs. In our personal lives, we chase quick success on social media for likes and hype, illusory speed, spending years on it instead of slowly and persistently building a career, developing deep skills, creating something truly valuable. The Pe-2 is our collective choice in favor of momentary gain, the easy solution, the beautiful number in a report. And the Tu-2 is the symbol of the difficult but right path, the path of quality, depth, and strategic thinking. The mass production of 11,247 pawns was not a triumph, but a greatest strategic mistake. It froze the development of an entire branch of aviation. We got thousands of complex, accident-prone, and ineffective machines instead of hundreds, and then thousands of truly formidable Tu-2s. The fate of Vladimir Petlyakov is a separate tragedy. A genius who saw his brainchild being mutilated but was powerless to change anything. He died in a plane crash in 42. Ironic or inevitable? We will never know what heights he could have reached if not for the cramped cages of the Sharashka and the haste dictated from above. So what remains? Memory remains, and a lesson that you cannot blindly believe numbers alone, that behind apparent simplicity and speed often lies a deadly trap, that true perfection requires time, courage, and, sometimes, refusing short-term benefits. Friends, this story is a reason to think. Or have you encountered a P-2 in your life? Maybe it was an unnecessary but fashionable gadget, or a job where you chased metrics, not meaning. Or maybe you see examples of speed fetishism around you today. Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss it together. Your opinion is priceless. And of course, if this text hooked you, made you think, support the channel with a subscription. There are many more such deep and uncomfortable stories ahead. Thank you for staying with us until the end.